Okay, it is about 8:32, and it is Monday, May 27, 2019. Uh, Today is Memorial Day, and welcome to week 6. I'm sorry, week 6. That would be it. Week number 4 of drugs and crime, and I'm going to spend close to the next hour discussing issues that will provide details about the assignments for week 4 and about the topic for the week. So let's go ahead and let me share my screen. Okay, and you see on the screen, you see various documents, information here on this page. And you see here about critical thinking. Of course, rubrics are in each weekly assignment. I do encourage you again, and I say it over and over to all students, pay close attention to your rubrics, because your rubrics provide you details concerning how I grade the assignments. And many of you miss the details of the rubric and lose points, especially with the APA citations in the body and references at the end. And then I always say this: make sure that your citations are not just thrown in there. Citations should be throughout the body of your paper so that you can support the statements that you provide in your paper with the sources. And then citations should match also your reference page as well. And then there's a rubric for discussions. And you see today we are at week 4. And you have recordings here for lectures week 1, week 2, and week 3. So now let's look at our week 4 announcement. It says we're going to talk about drug-related criminal activity, law enforcement perspective. From the law enforcement perspective, and to prepare for assignments, you're going to read chapter 6 and 7 of the textbook. The textbook is called Drugs, Crime, and Justice. It is the same textbook that is provided in the syllabus. Let's make sure that you see that, because a couple students have asked me about that, and here it is. Drugs, Crime, and Justice. This is the correct textbook that you're using for this course right here. All right. So now let's go back to the announcements. Go back to the course homepage. Just wanted to show you that textbook again. So the textbook, and I sent you corresponding chapter 6 and 7 PowerPoints for your study. We're going to deal with the activities combating drug trafficking organizations, which are DTOs, drug trafficking organizations, and the law enforcement response to the heroin epidemic. We're going to deal with that in just a few minutes. And then due on tomorrow, which is the 28th, is your initial discussion assignment on forfeiture. And then your reply post is due Saturday. Again, I've stated before and I state again, make sure that your discussion posts are on time, and also make sure that they're content oriented. Citations and references are appreciated but not required. And I do request if you could reply to more than one post. All right. Finally, complete the course project, Heroin and Opioids, Law Enforcement Perspective, and then complete the quiz. This is a quiz that is a time quiz. And then there is a mid-quarter student survey. If you would take time to complete that, I would greatly appreciate it. And then you know about my motto and what it stands for. All right, let's go to the course calendar. And here we are, right here on the 27th with your reading assignment that I just talked about, your initial post, and then your reply post due on the 1st. Notice that by the time you get to your initial post, we'll be at the 1st of June. Course is almost over. And then on the 2nd, your written assignment course project will be due along with the quiz. All right? So you want to make sure that you take note of that as well. And you'll see that going to June, since we'll be going to June, you'll see where we are. This is where we are this week, leading into June. Then you'll see that the quarter ends 2 weeks from this Friday. The 14th is our last day of class. All assignments must be due. Assignments turned in after that, I repeat, will not be graded. At this juncture, you should also be aware of the fact that assignments for weeks 1 through 3 will not be accepted unless I've made previous arrangements with you. I said this before, and I'll say it again. We're in the second half of the course. It's like your midterm has passed. All right, so we're starting the second portion. So for your assignment, your course project, again, capital minimum of 3 pages, and you're going to cover each of these bullet points in your writing. 3 credible, reliable sources other than the textbook, and most of you have gotten that. Do not rely on Wikipedia. No one has used Wikipedia so far this quarter. I'm happy to hear that. And then also be sure to include proper citations in your paper to your sources. And then a cover page, and then a reference page, which does not count in your page requirement. And then I've already shared with you about the Drugs and Crime course guide, and you can look at that for the assignment for the week. All right, so now let's take a minute and look at the rubric, which I encourage you to do. It tells the due date. Click on the rubric, and it tells you the same thing pretty much as what's in the module. And you're going to read this thoroughly, and then include at least 3 credible, reliable resources, which we already discussed. And then your paper is going to be in paragraph form, double-spaced, and it's going to be properly written with grammar, spelling, and all of those kinds of things. Minimum of 3 pages. 3 pages does not mean 2.5, 2 3/4. It means 3 pages. You can go beyond that if you want. And then, of course, APA with the title page, a reference page, proper spacing, paragraph indents. All sources are properly cited with in-text citations in the body of the paper. Okay? Paper has properly formatted reference page where all sources relied upon are listed. You can go to NoodleBib and you can find that information to help you properly format as well. All right, and then that you use or don't use. And many of you lose points with the minimum 3 pages, and some of you lose it by not having 3 credible, reliable resources. Okay? So let's close that out. And then you do your assignment. Then you'll see 2 other things that are in here that we already talked about. And that is your discussion post, and it tells you about what you're supposed to do using the scenario here. And then you're going to identify 2 arguments in support of forfeiture programs, and then your reply post respond to a student who's made a different point or argument regarding the forfeiture programs, and then compare and contrast your arguments and debate the points. It says be sure to include proper citations in your posts to the source you rely upon for the information, though I don't take points off for it, but I do like you to do that. It's a benefit. It's a good habit to develop. And then dealing with your discussion posts, you can go to the guides again, and it helps you with the discussion posts. Due dates, I've already gone over, and this says you can find in the course syllabus, as well as the course calendar, as well as you can find it in the announcements as well. And then your quiz. It's a time quiz, 30 minutes. You'll have 1 opportunity to complete the exam. You already know that, and those kind of things. Then you'll provide your key word that I'll give you today. That'll be due on Sunday as well. If you click on that, you'll see that it's due on June 2nd by 11:59 p.m. or before. That's to get all of your points. And then we'd appreciate it if you could complete the survey. Let us know what you think about the course and how it's coming along. And it's anonymous. No one, including me, knows who answered what, but we do appreciate help with that. Okay? And that's it for the week that you have in terms of assignments that are due. Again, we're coming down to the stretch, so you want to make sure that you have everything in place. Okay. So we're going to deal with today how the law enforcement responds to our crisis, combating DTOs, drug traffic organization, and the law enforcement response to the heroin epidemic. We're going to deal with that from the law enforcement perspective in terms of your written assignment, and we're going to talk about that also as well. So let's talk about drug trafficking organizations. As you should be aware from your research that you've discovered that there are organizations, DTOs, that operate all over the world, from Mexico and China. Those are the big ones. And they supply the distribution of the drugs throughout the country. And the Chinese DTOs are one of the big distributors of opium and heroin to the United States. And then they add other things to it as well, fentanyl and cafetanil, which is sold on the streets. And they use that to cut it, to stretch it out. Now, fentanyl is a synthetic drug and a prescription drug prescribed by physicians. So what they do is they mix this. Carfentanil is a powerful sedative, and it's used for animals, tranquilizers, we say, like elephants, and it's something that's not so good. Think about what it's used for. And of course, though, ingesting heroin with these have resulted in many people killing themselves over OD, because they don't even know what's in the heroin in itself. Heroin is bad all by itself, but then when you add these different things. There is an article which I'm not going to spend time with. You can click on, and you can take a look at this at your own leisure. But anyway, you have Mexican cartels. One of the big cartels that we know was kind of, I should say, it was tapped into when El Chapo was arrested and has been convicted and incarcerated. However, though, the next person steps up and begins to run it. And so these drugs are distributed throughout the country by soldiers in the streets, generally street gangs, and that's what has made street gangs more violent. When they started distributing drugs, they started including guns and high-powered weapons that they used to protect their turf. And unfortunately, as we both know, these individuals are not good shooters, and many innocent people are killed. In the distribution of these drugs that are smuggled into this country, particularly dealing with Mexico, there is money sometimes that is paid to corrupt government officials or border officials from the United States to Mexico. Law enforcement, security forces, and public officials may either ignore the activities of the drug trafficking organization or support and protect them because they're on their payroll. Mexican DTOs advance their operations through corruption and violence, threaten. There are people who are from those countries. They are used as mules, or they carry the stuff, and they don't carry it because of the fact they want to, because if they don't do the job, then the cartel in their country may kill their families. So it's operated by intimidation. It says the number of cartels is constantly growing, and there's battles between the various cartels for the U.S. drug market, which is one of the bigger ones. And they talk about traditionally the major cartels consist of Sinaloa cartel, the Jalisco, New Generation cartel, the Juarez cartel, the Gulf cartel, and they mention some others. And bottom line is that there's a lot of violence, a lot of people killed by these, but there's a lot of money involved in these kind of things. And so the organization in the United States that battles it is the DEA, or the Drug Enforcement Administration, and they attempt to fight these Mexican cartels, and their agents spread throughout the United States and other countries across the world, including Mexico. And they work to try to disrupt the operation and business of the drug trafficking organization that cross the Mexican border as multi-jurisdictional task forces. Now, be aware of the fact that there has been a whole lot of discussion about building walls to try to stop it. The issue of drugs entering this country is generally through what we call legal checkpoints, where the drugs are smuggled by vehicles with fake gas tanks, and in the part of the car, the seats, some of the panels have drugs in them as well. And sometimes, every once in a while, you'll find some in the trunks. But most times, you don't find them in the open area. They've become very clever with this. So law enforcement's use informants primarily, and those are individuals who may have gotten caught, and they will what we call flip to protect, get a light sentence for themselves. They're undercover officers. They're drug by bus, where officers pose as gang members or as drug dealers, and so forth. And then, of course, there's the ability of the government to use legal wiretaps to look at some of these sophisticated organizations. But you will be surprised at how often, like El Chapo, who was brought down himself because there were some individuals who agreed to testify against him and provide information about how the drugs were brought into this country. So, says working on large scale requires information sharing with both federal agencies in the United States and other countries as well. So, in addition to the DEA, there is the ATF, what we call the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, that also work in conjunction with the DEA. And they work hard in terms of seizing the weapons that are used by cartels. And then the Department of Homeland Security, which is recent, as from 2011, is at the forefront of working with the other two agencies to battle the DTOs in the world. The Department of Homeland Security works hard to detect the illegal shipments, money coming of drugs and money that are coming across the border, and also the Border Patrol agents also. Now remember, I already told you that the whole thing is that sometimes you have corrupt individuals, they're on the payrolls, and they turn their back, and they make good money in terms of doing that. Of course, what happens oftentimes is that they get across the border and the state patrol troopers deal with the drug trafficking across the country once it crosses into the United States, and they work together too with the local police. And a lot of times you'll hear of these big drug busts that they've found at the local level. And all of these are efforts by the federal government to deal with DTOs on the federal, state, municipal level. And it is really, really a pretty challenging process. And this little map gives you some ideas about it, okay, how vast it is. So that's how it works, through these huge cartels, drug trafficking organizations, and the organizations that work against them, okay? So now let's look at what law enforcement response does. Now, you should be aware of the fact that law enforcement has, as I already shared, operated in many ways to deal with the response to our heroin epidemic, and dealing with opioid derivatives like fentanyl, and dealing with heroin itself laced with carfentini. As I was telling you about earlier, heroin addicts inject these things into their body, and again, they're not pure, and the products result in creating problems physically for the individuals, such as their breathing, their respiration, and other things, and sometimes resulting in death. So now there are a number of factors that are involved now with law enforcement. One of the things that has come about is Narcan, which is a brand name of Naloxone, a prescription that is an antidote to overdose to opioids. And what opioids do is it slows your breathing. Ingestion may stop you from breathing entirely. And what Naloxone does is that it blocks the effects of the opioid and reverses it. Now, the issue here is that Naloxone works on overdoses of heroin and prescription painkillers such as oxycodone and hydrocodone and morphine. And Narcan is a controlled substance, but it requires authorization for possession and administration by the Drug by the first responders. First responders have them. Very expensive drugs. And in most cases, um, uh, this says a protocol called a standing order can be issued for a department by any provider holding a license to write a prescription for the drug. And what it does is it will save lives. The problem, though, with these drugs is that individuals find themselves in situations where they are not able to get the help fast enough. And so the FDA has approved a nasal application so that avoiding the need for Narcan from injection, because it takes longer for it to work. Nasal application is easier for first responders to administer in the field and use minimal training as well. And then you can click on this and you can read more about that as well. And then there are different drug kits that police have and other individuals have in terms of helping with that. Now, one of the things that has happened is that organizations or states are moving towards what we call deflection treatment and deflection programs. And I shared with you a document. Matter of fact, it's this document right here, which I sent you and told you to download and take a look at it. I'm going to see if let's see if I can get to that. Let me try to see if I can pull it up for you so you can see it on the screen. Give me a minute. Go to my content. And let's go to page 2. I think it's page 3. It is. And we go down. These are all the different things that I have here. Here it is. And here it is, right here. And so you can see Senate Bill 3023, which was some legislation that was introduced. It was called the Community Law Enforcement Partnership Act for Deflection and Substance Use Disorder Treatment Act. And what it does, as it says, it gives police a tool to combat the opioid crisis. And what it does is it says it authorizes local law enforcement leaders to create programs that deflect individuals who have overdosed or who have substance use problems away from the criminal justice system. And what it does is this. If an individual, for example, comes into a police station and when these deflection programs takes place, they have two choices. They can be arrested for possession or they cannot arrest. What deflections programs do is provide a third option, and that is rather than to arrest or not arrest, is instead to provide an ability to connect those individuals with community-based substance use services that address their underlying problems, such as the hospitals and drug treatment programs. On the back here, there are so many different organizations of this that are mental health organizations, colleges, universities, hospitals, and other type of organizations. And what this does, it provides an ability between law enforcement and substance abuse treatment providers to work together to deal with the issue. And I've said over and over again that one of the issues that is important is getting to the stage where law enforcement recognizes that this is a health issue and that even though the legal issue is involved, but it is something that will help individuals in terms of surviving. So 3023 provides a roadmap for partnership between law enforcement, substance use providers, and the communities to guide development of deflection programs in the communities. We are the first state in the nation to consider this legislation, and we hope that it catches on with other states as well. And then there's some statistics that are given here about the tremendous number of opioid deaths, which you may not see clearly, but it says the number of overdose deaths from all opioids has increased by 82% in just the last 3 years. Opioid drug overdose killed 45% more people than homicides. Think about that. Opioid drug overdose killed 25% more people than motor vehicle crashes. And listen to this. Opioid drug overdoses kill more people than people who died due to all gun-related causes, including homicide, suicide, and accidental shootings. That is a powerful, powerful statement to let you know the level of the epidemic that we are facing. And now opioid issues are not only urban areas, but they're suburban and rural areas as well. And so 3023 helps to lay out the program, and it is actually, as it says, modeled after Good Samaritan protections for police emergency responders with regard to their use of opioid overdose antidotes, Naloxone, as we already been talking about, and provides immunity from civil suits to law enforcement partners for dealing with drug-related activities, providing good faith, removing the potential barrier for new program development. Now, the law doesn't require any law enforcement agency to create a deflection program. It does not require the state to appropriate funding, but this is, at least it's pointing in the right direction. So I refer this to you to see how law enforcement is, as one example of how a state, which is my home state, is responding to that issue. Okay, so let's go back into where we were. Here we go. We're back here. So now I want to get into dealing with chasing the dragon. This is a video that I want you to take a look at. It's a few minutes, so I'm going to take off my headset. It's only about 4 minutes long. I'm going to shut off my calendar.
Prescription pills and opiates has definitely become an increasing problem that we see, not only involving the Crimes Investigate Actual Drug Diversion, but it, involves other things too. People start committing other crimes when they start seeing, the need that they have to get these drugs. I think the worst part of it is that starting at, kids that at a very young age, kids that are, middle school even, are starting to find out what these pills are, and they might think it's fun at first. And then, you talk to them a year, 2 years later, and you realize it's a different story. I mean, so, just the degree that people go to get these pills is insane. I mean, I've seen people that drive 7 hours one way every month each way, so that's a 14-hour round trip, just to get these pills because, so you need a job. You can't work your job anymore because all you care about is, driving up to get these pills. And, I mean, your life is over because all you can focus on is how do I get these drugs.
We've done search warrants in huge homes, multi-million-dollar houses, fancy cars, and we've done search warrants in houses where there's no food in the refrigerators. I remember one individual subject, I had arrested his mother and his father, and also arrested him. He was injecting OxyContin, as many as 35 a day, intravenously, and he was using creek water just out of a local stream because he was living out in the woods. Everybody thinks they pop a few pills, it's no big deal. You young kids out there, you better just be very, very aware of what's going on with these pills. You can get addicted with one pill, and for the rest of your life, it will absolutely ruin you. It doesn't discriminate against you young or old, or you're black or you're white or you're a male or you're a female. I've arrested from 12 years old to 86 years old. I've arrested grandma and grandpa. I've arrested the young boy that takes a pill from his parents' cabinet and takes him to school and gets him some other kids in school. When somebody gets sick, gets rushed to a hospital, and thank God doesn't die. I've worked probably at least 24 overdose deaths that are 100% related to prescription meds where it's too late, they're already dead.
A lot of students went down the road, a lot of young people go down the road of trying to drug for recreational purposes, and they don't understand the devastation that it has to their own life and the lives of their parents. I should add the victims of the crime include infants. We have had subjects who were pregnant women who gave birth to oxycodone, opiate-addicted babies and infants. They even had to have the baby in jail. And it's a growing problem as well.
A lot of overdoses, a lot of death. Scary thing is it's getting younger and younger. It used to be the heroin overdoses seemed like they were all adults. Lately they've been getting younger and younger, low 20s, even into their high teens. So I've talked to hundreds of heroin addicts or opiate addicts, and they'll tell me the same thing. If they could do anything, one thing different, they never would have started in the first place. That's the one regret that they all have is that they started when they were young, and once you're an addict for life. Best way to avoid that is just to never do it.
We're seeing a dramatic shift in how it's affecting the lives of young people. They're experimenting with friends at parties, and they think it's safe to take pills from the medicine cabinet or a friend. And during a 1 week period, we had 9 fatal overdoses in a 3-jurisdiction area. And over the Christmas holiday, I read 2 obituaries of people that I had arrested for prescription fraud and related offenses. Their parents buried them. They were young, 20-some years old.
So you see, this is something that is pretty serious. Give me a minute while I plug back in my headset. Plug it back in, and let me turn on. Okay, and there I should pop up in a second. There I am, and you see that this is a very serious issue, and so people are their lives are in danger, and law enforcement is trying to help people. And again, like I said, with programs like Illinois Senate Bill 3023, and I encourage my students to look at very seriously the understanding as a law enforcement professional coming into the future of law enforcement, recognizing that this is a health issue. Sure, there are laws that are being violated, and you can already tell that you see, here's the deal, people, is that people are taking these drugs and then they're getting things out of the medicine cabinet, and they start out with painkillers. You're going to hear a little bit more about that in the coming next couple of weeks, in weeks 5 and 6, about how painkillers are used and how the graduation is from very simple painkillers, which I've shared with you before, as to how it leads to heroin and opioid overdose. And so it is a very, 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 very serious issue, and it is an epidemic because it's taking young lives, it's taking rich, poor, doesn't matter what your financial community, what your level is. Yeah, there are things like Noxawan and Narcan, but a lot of times those drugs those antibiotics don't make it to you in time to be able to block the effects of the opioid and overdose symptoms, and you will die. You will die, and as simple as that. The other thing is that your quality of life will change. You're going to see coming up in the future weeks some videos that I'll be sharing with you of people how they've gone from living a good life into how the use of these drugs has turned them into a monster. As I say to people, these are not bad people. These are people who made bad choices. These are people who were running away from their problems and trying to solve them by dealing with these drugs. And so I'm going to terminate this session today. I hope you had a good holiday today, but I hope you will remember that this quarter will be over in a short few weeks, and to get those assignments in, and make sure you read the rubrics and follow the rubrics. And I want to leave you with this one thing I want you to use for the key today, and that's opiate addiction. Opiate, O-P-I-A-T-E, addiction. And that's what I want you to give me for your points. So with that, I'm going to say good night to you and see you next week at the same time. Good night.